Hey guys, it's Blade again from Audio Security, and today we're looking at line output converters. But you may be asking, what is a line output converter? So essentially a line output converter is an ability to add an aftermarket amplifier to a factory head unit or factory system. So essentially what it does is it takes a speaker signal in and converts it to a low level or RCA output. That way you are able to run an RCA to an aftermarket amplifier. That be a subwoofer amp, a speaker amp, or a 5-channel amp, whatever you need it for, it does that for you. Now we've got three in front of us today, starting at lowest price, going up to more expensive and higher quality equipment. So we'll quickly go through each product and I'll give you my thoughts on each one and what they do, how they work. We'll go from there. Okay, so we'll start off with the most affordable option, and that is the Vibe Lock 2. So essentially, it's a very, very basic but decent quality line output converter. So you take your speaker signals and power input this side, and it gives you your RCA outputs. So what we have, I'll just quickly pull this off. So what we have is a few cables here. Now, the colors do make sense when you know what you're doing, but essentially you have this yellow cable here is your permanent live input. The solid black cable, which is here, is your earth. So that powers the unit on. White and white black stripe is a front left speaker input. And a gray and gray black stripe is a front right speaker input. And then this is a remote output. So essentially this will sense a signal coming in. So when you turn your head unit on, it will sense a speaker signal coming into this, and then it will send a 12-volt remote feed out to your amplifiers. So this will switch your amplifier on for you. And then you would plug your RCAs into this and go to your amplifier, and that will take your low-level signal through to the amp. So other than that, there's really not much to it. You have a small adjustment on the RCA side, that's to change the voltage of the RCAs. But other than that, it's a very, very basic system. They work well in kind of older, more basic vehicles. We don't tend to fit these in higher end or newer vehicles, purely for the fact that it's not as intelligent as the other ones that we're going to review today. But nonetheless, still a very good and affordable option. Now this is currently on our website at $19.99, so price point very, very cheap and affordable. Okay, so next up we're going to look at the Connections SLI2. So this is essentially the step up from the Vibe option that we've just gone through. So the inputs and outputs are essentially the same. You have more options on this, however. You have options to take a rear speaker signal or a front speaker signal, however works best for you. And then again, you have your RCA outputs. Obviously, it's laid out slightly differently. You don't have an in and then an out. It's just in and out on the same loom. And this plug does come off. So it's detachable. If you need to take this out for whatever reason, it can be taken out without having to desolder wires and stuff like that. So it makes life a bit easier. But the main thing is this is a lot more intelligent. So the speaker signal sensing is a lot more intelligent in the fact that if you have a newer vehicle, this is going to basically be able to tell the difference between just a sensor going off overnight in the vehicle or an actual speaker signal. Now, we have seen in the past when fitting the cheaper line-out converters into newer vehicles that have a lot more sensors, what happens is the cheaper line-out converter will think that the vehicle is on, running, when really it's not, and it will turn the amps on. And that way you're going to come back to a dead battery because your amp's been on all night. You don't want that. So if you've got a newer vehicle with a lot more sensors and stuff like BMW, Mercedes, this is definitely going to be a good option. And then you've got the two outputs for a subwoofer, for instance. Now, one other thing I thought I'd mention quickly before I go on to the next item is the diagram on the back. Now, this helps you out a lot in terms of if you're not sure what color cable does what. This is all labeled on the back for what color is for what, essentially. So it tells you, for instance, this white cable here, you've got white, that's in, front, left, positive. There it goes. You do have dip switches on the side. That is if you're basically taking a low or high power input. Majority of the time it's going to be high power because you're taking a speaker signal in. So it's very unlikely you're going to need to change this, but it's there if you need it. And you do also have a power light just above the plug there. Now that's it, essentially. It's a nice and easy, simple system. very much like the Vibe, but a lot better quality. You do also have these little indentations so you can mount the converter down, so it's not just flying around somewhere. So that's handy. But yeah, again, this is available on our website. This is at $59.99, so very, very affordable still, especially for the quality of the item. We tend to fit these on a lot of vehicles, so it's a very, very good option. Now, the third and final option is the AudioControl LC2i. Okay, so the AudioControl LC2i. Now, this is the big daddy, very well known, very well used option for your vehicle. Now, this line out converter is one that we would use in almost every install, purely for the fact that the quality out of it is fantastic, especially for subwoofer use. You have dual outputs, so as well as a subwoofer output, you have a main output as well. So if you need to add a second amp to the system, you can do that. As well as that, you have adjustment for each channel, as well as AccuBase. Now, AccuBase is essentially a bass processor. So the signal that's coming in, it cleans that signal up and boosts out the bass properties a bit, boosts them up a bit, and then sends it out. So you can adjust the AccuBase on its own. You have a dial here to adjust that, and then you can just adjust the bass on its own. So it's very, very good for adjustment, very good for sound quality and ease of use. So to give you another example for ease of use, something like that. So these are your inputs. So this is a power side and this is your speaker side. But the fact that this unplugs is so helpful in the fact that if you're working in a very small area, you need to get these little tiny cables in here. Very, very easy to use. The only downside I would say about this is it doesn't come with any cables as such. So you need to provide cables to extend to your amp, for instance. But other than that, this is a proper bit of kit. So to go in depth with it a bit more, so speaker signals in. So again, you'll need full range in. So that's a positive and negative left and positive and negative right, full range. And then you have a remote out, a remote in, a 12 volt feed and a ground. So this will give you your remote out just like the rest of them. This will take a remote input. So if your vehicle is not switching on for whatever reason, if your speaker signals aren't strong enough to turn this on for signal sensing, you can send an ignition feed in, which will turn it on. But this will still also give you a remote out to the amp. So you've always got an option to turn the amps on when this turns on. Now over to the output side. As I mentioned, this has two outputs. So you have a bass output, which is labeled here, left and right, and you have a main output. So what we usually use this for is you have your bass output for your subwoofer, essentially. A main output could be used for a 2 or a 4 channel amp. Now, one thing to remember, if you're using this for a 4 channel amp, for instance, you won't have a front to rear fader. So what I'm talking about is on your head unit settings, if you're trying to fade the sound from front to back, because this is only a single channel output, it's not going to allow you to do that. So at that point, you would need to upgrade to the LC2i, which has another output, essentially. So that's something we can cover in another video. But essentially, this is a proper bit of kit. You have a power and a clip light here. So when you're adjusting, you can take your RCAs out, adjust your outputs before you've even connected anything. Make sure your maximized light's not lighting up, so make sure you're all clean, and then you can plug everything in and tune from there. One thing I'd like to add on as well, the outputs on here, so the RCA outputs are higher voltage than the rest, so the quality you're going to get into your amp is going to be better still, so definitely good. There is also an optional controller input which you can purchase separately. That's called the ARC1 or ARC. That will plug directly into here and that will control your bass. So you have a bass controller. So if you don't have the option to add a bass controller to your amplifier, you can add it directly to the line out converter. Handy that. Again, this is available on our website. This is currently at $129.99, so it is the most expensive one, but the most usable, user-friendly, and the best one on the market really for most vehicles. So this is definitely going to be my choice for anyone that's looking for a line out converter for good quality audio. If you're just looking to quickly get something into your vehicle, I don't blame you. You're welcome to go for the cheaper option. It will still work, but this is going to give you the best quality. Okay guys, so that was the overview of the 3 line output converters we have on the table here. Now just to go quickly through it again, we have the Vibe Block 2, which is the £20 option, the most affordable option on the table, which will still essentially do what the others do to a to a point, but is a lot more affordable in a smaller package and is usually used for slightly older vehicles. You have the Connections SLI2, which is the £60 option. That is the kind of all-round good option for most vehicles, but only has one output. And then you have the big boy LC2i, which has the two outputs. You have AccuBase, the removable plugs, all singing, all dancing, but it's £130. Now to quickly overview again why you would need a line out converter. So nowadays, a lot of vehicles you can't actually change the head units on, but if you want sound in the vehicle, it is still possible to add sounds essentially. You would need a line output converter. So you can't run an aftermarket system without an RCA input unless you are doing high level input, which dramatically reduces the quality of the sound. High level input, I'll quickly mention, is essentially what we're doing here. You're taking a speaker signal in, but it goes directly into the amp. But that means you're getting high voltage in, which you're amplifying high voltage, which means the quality is not going to be as good as lower voltage. So that's why we would use these. So yeah, if you can't change your head unit, you would need to look for one of these. If you can change your head unit, then changing the head unit will be a better option. You'll get a lot more control, but this is going to be for someone that you can't physically change it, or you don't want to change it, essentially. So if the LC2i is not enough for you, say if you wanted more channel outputs, as I mentioned earlier, you can upgrade to the LC6 or even the LC7i. So the LC6 is essentially a 6-channel line out converter but doesn't have AccuBase. If you want the 6-channel line out converter with AccuBase, they have that also, the AudioControl LC7i. So still 6 channels, but you have the AccuBase built in. And then if that's still not enough for you and you really want to get into it and fine tune the whole system, you'd want to be looking at a processor. So a processor is essentially a much bigger version of this. It takes the signal in, sends a signal out, but in between you can tune the system. So you can fine tune it with an EQ, crossovers, time alignment, that kind of thing. So if you want some more information on how a processor works, drop a comment down below and we'll try and get that on the channel. But that's it from me. Make sure you like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. You've always got an option to turn the amps on when this turns on. Pardon me.